Good morning, everyone. I hope you are well. This morning, we are continuing learning our Mishnah, which we are doing every morning, and we are up to the 13th Mishnah of the first chapter. But before we come to that, hope everyone is well, had a good day, enjoyed the pleasant weather yesterday. And today, we are dedicating our learning in memory of Leah Bas Bible, Tzivia Bas Mordechai, Avram ben David Slavin, Shlomo ben Yisrael Morris, Eliezer ben Shmuel Teret, Eliezer Shalom ben Avram Shmuel Beres, Sipora Fegel Bas Reuven Baruch, Shalom ben Elieli, Beina Bas Bible, from Rosh Hashanah Bas Yaakov Shmuel, and as well as Yechezkel ben Pinchas, Rizel Bas Baruch, Yisrael ben Tzvi Reeves, Miro Bas David, Eliezer ben Pinchas, Label ben Shol Craig. We wish each of you that have your site today or are saying Kaddish, long life and only simchas. Okay, so we have a short Mishnah today and a longer Mishnah and a more famous Mishnah tomorrow. I think we will, if we've got time, we'll do both, but probably just do the first. We'll see how we go. Anyways, the Mishnah discusses about the purpose of life, continuing the theme that we mentioned. It's a Mishnah that Hillel authored, and it goes as follows. Hu haya omer, he used to say, when it says in a Mishnah, he used to say, it means that this was his raison d'etre, this was his adage, this is what he was known for, okay? So it's not just, one of the things that somebody said once upon a time, but if you think back, we all have phrases when we think of our loved ones and we think about them. They had certain phrases, I can't think of any offhand, but we think of our loved ones. We can think of statements that they made, or phrases that they kept saying, or adages that they kept saying. I remember one gentleman in Glasgow. He always, he's still alive. He should be well. But he always used to say to me, my first chairman, in fact, "Fail to prepare, prepare to fail." So imagine, that is his mindset. That's what keeps him focused. So this is one of the statements that Hillel made in his lifetime that he was famous for. Nagad Shema Avad Shema. It's in Aramaic. He used to say that he who seeks renown, fame, loses his Avad Shema, will lose his reputation. Adolomosif Yasef. He who doesn't increase in Torah learning, then he will decrease. Adolo Yalif Kitla Chayev. He who refuses to teach Torah deserves death. And he who exploits the crown of Torah shall fade away. So let us try and understand this rather cryptic, puzzling Mishnah. So what is Hillel saying? Hillel is saying as follows, that the discipline of Torah learning is not like anything else. There was Bertrand Russell. I don't know if you heard the story before. It's one of my adages. Bertrand Russell was in the 1940s, was a professor of ethics at the City University in New York. And he, despite teaching ethics, it was discovered that his behavior in his private life, lo and behold, was not particularly ethical. So he was called, in those days, they did care, and he was called before the board of ethics, and they said, Professor Russell, how do you reconcile the fact that you are a lecturer in ethics and yet you are acting in an unethical way, in an immoral way? He said, it's perfectly simple. If I was to teach mathematics, right, algebra, or if I was teaching mathematics, you wouldn't expect me to be a rectangle. I teach ethics. It doesn't mean I have to be ethical. In other words, it's an academic exercise. It's an intellectual gymnastics. It's information, but it doesn't actually have to be reflected in one's personal conduct. Well, friends, I can tell you, nothing can be further from the truth. It's the exact opposite when it comes to Torah learning. And that is why we get so upset when we see people that look the part and they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. In other words, if their behavior doesn't match up to the teachings of the Torah, we get very upset. Have you ever wondered why you get so upset? I think the reason is precisely this Mishnah, because the point that we are making is that we expect the Torah is meant to have a transformative impact on our lives. If you learn it properly, then it changes you for the better. You become more improved. It molds us. That is what Torah learning does. We become more refined. We become more ethical, more spiritual, more sensitive, more considerate. And if you don't become that when you learn, as we are doing now, then it means that you haven't been open to the Torah. You've had an ulterior motive for learning. You haven't actually learnt it with a genuine sincerity and with the right mindset. So let's have a look at this Mishnah. So the first point he says is, if it is that you want to learn because of fame and fortune, right? What are you doing? You're busy with, making sure that everyone knows about your teachings, not because you want to spread Torah, but purely because you want to make a name for yourself. You want honor. You want your name up in lights. Then you will it'll be counterproductive, because if a person does that with Torah, in fact, they will lose their reputation. And there are many examples of this where we see people that have tried to utilize the Torah, manipulate the Torah for their own personal gain. And in fact, it has backfired tremendously. Many examples, such as, no, I'm not going to say it. And let's move on to the next concept before something does slip. So somebody who doesn't increase his Torah learning decreases it. Now, what does that mean? How is it, if I have learned this Mishnah this morning, how can it be that if I don't increase, I decrease? Rav Zevlev, one of my teachers, explained it beautifully in terms of our spiritual journey in life. He says, and I don't know if you ever did this, Brent Cross, right? Everyone familiar? Remember Brent Cross? We used to go there in the good old days. So you have escalators that go up and down. So when I was a kid, I was a bit of a mischievous young chap, and I used to love running. My challenge was to run up the escalator before it came down. In other words, before it brought me down. So I used to run up. You have to run up very fast in order to be able to reach the top. Okay, what happens, and I tried this, if when I'm running up, I stop or I slow down, do you know what happens? I end up back where I started. I move downwards. So it's in spirituality, in order for us to move, to stay static, we have to keep on moving. If we just try to rest on our laurels, we'll actually move backwards. It's exactly where we are spiritually is like trying to go up a downward escalator. What is pulling us down? Well, life is pulling us down. There are so many distractions, so many pulls in so many directions, so many negative forces which are telling us the wrong thing in life and leading us in the wrong thing, that we have to be spiritually very strong. We have to be very sensitive, and we have to keep working just to stay where we are. So to move up, then one has to make an extra effort. So if a person says, well, I've acquired my knowledge and, I'm quite comfortable where I am, I don't want to change. In reality, if he was able to put himself under I was going to say a lie detector, but let's say a spiritual detector, right? They don't have one yet. Then it would come up that there are certain deficiencies, that he's not actually, there's cognitive dissonance in the way he's behaving. He's not actually the way he once was. And that's why so often when I meet people, they like to bask back and to reminisce about the good old days. Why? Because they're still living in the past. That's when they felt they accomplished. That's when they achieved. Now, I'm just living in the past. So clearly, for us to keep moving, just moving forwards, we have to really make efforts to resist the forces of inertia and laziness and all the other things that pull us back. That's point number two. Number three, somebody who refuses to teach Torah deserves death. We know that the Torah is considered a life force. Rebbe Kiva, when he was teaching Torah publicly, and in fact it cost him his life, one of his students or fellow rabbis said to him, you're risking your life. How can you do this just to teach Torah? He said, imagine that there are fish that are swimming around in the pond, right? And all of a sudden a fox comes along and he says, that the fishermen are coming with big nets and they could catch you, right? So come out of the water, come on my back, and I'll protect you. Says the fish in this analogy that Rabbi Kiva famously gave. He said, silly fox, in here I am in danger. If I leave my life force, which is the water, I will instantly die. Says Rabbi Kiva to his student. He said as follows. He says, it's true that I am endangering my life by teaching Torah to others, but if I don't, then I am dead. Torah is our life force, right? If we do not have this as our moral compass, if we do not connect to our essence, to our souls, what are we? What are we? So if we're not willing to share that with other people, right? If we don't share it with our children, with our grandchildren, if we don't share this with other people, the wisdom that we have learned, right? Then we are depriving them of life. That's what the Mishna means. The next point that the final point that the ethics of the fathers Mishna says is, he who exploits the crown of the Torah, then he shall fade away. Again, the question really is, what is the difference between this and the first point? And truth is, I don't have an answer. I think you could be just summarizing, but it's something we need to look into. But it is the same point, that if you use the Torah as a common tool for selfish gain, for self-interest, for self-promotion, then you're actually going to lose out. You become very superficial. You become a PR, public image machine, and ultimately you will have a long, hard look in the mirror at yourself, and you'll recognize and realize that you're a fake. You're a failure, right? You're living a life of lies. And I think it is important for us, as we'll see in the next Mishnah, if I am not for myself, then who will be for me, and so on and so forth. We'll learn it. It's one of the most famous Mishnahs, which we'll do tomorrow. It's about being real with ourselves, which is what tuning into this study period is all about. You are incredible, each and every one of you, that you get up every single morning, most of you, and you come and you study to become better people, right? If we want change, and if we want to change ourselves, it's not by force, it's not by shouting and screaming, it's by thinking, by studying, by working on ourselves. That is the way that in Judaism we believe we can bring about real and lasting change. What about those monuments? Should they all be coming down or not? I'm thinking about writing about it, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Leave me your thoughts, let me know. Should all the monuments come down in London and up and down this country because of our ugly past, because of the fact that there were slave owners and the Romans and everything else? What do you think? Interesting point for us to discuss. Anyways, we're going to make a memorial prayer now before I get carried away on my soapbox at Speaker's Corner. El Malay Rachamim Shoichin Bamroing me, Mamasim Nuchoina Akam Feshina Bamalos Kadoshim Retiring Kazorikimasim, Es Nishmas Yecheska Ben Pinchas, Rise of Basporach, Yisrael Ben Tzvi Reeves, Miro Bas David, Eliezer Ben Pinchas, Label Ben Shoal Craig, Leah Bas Bible, Sylvia Bas Mordechai, Avram Ben David Slavin, Shlomo Ben Yisrael Morris, Eliezer Ben Shmuel Oteret, Eliezer Shalom Ben Avram Shmuel Beres, Tzipora Fegel Bas, Reuven Baruch Shalom Ben Eli Ali, Ben Bas Bible from Moshe Shoshana, Bas Yaakov Shmuel Shal, Chulionamam, Began Aiden Taimanu Chosam Lachim Balarachamim, Yasiren Beseisa Kana Pavli Olamim, Vitzor Besachaim Sinshwa Samadina Inach Lasam. No one reminded me. We forgot to do Psalm 23. We'll do it now. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Even when I walk in the valley of darkness, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my adversaries. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. Lastly, friends, we will recite the Refuah Shlema prayer for all those that are unwell or have been hurt in the last week. מי שברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב משה אהרון דוד ושלמה יברך רפס החיילים. בעבור שאנו מתפללים בעבורם בזכות הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא רחמים עליהם לחמו לפוסם וישלח להם רפואה שלמה ושמיים לכל בן בסוף כל ישראל רפואת הנפש רפואת הגוף. השבת הזמן קרב ונאמר amen. Keep safe, keep well. We've got one of the highlights of Ethics of the Fathers tomorrow. Please don't miss it. Come along. We can't wait. We also have a program tonight, and tomorrow night we have with Pastor Alex a fascinating and very frank conversation we'll be having between us about racism and so many other issues. And in the meantime, have a great day, keep well, all the best.